Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome back to ADBC History. My name is Dan, and today I'm going to explain to you what the famous Ides of March actually were, right? Everyone knows that Julius Caesar, the great Roman politician and dictator, was murdered and stabbed to death by his fellow politicians in the Roman Senate on this day, the Ides of March, in the year 44 BC. And thus, I think from Shakespeare or something comes the famous line, "Beware the Ides of March." But what were the Ides of March? What is an Ide? Today we're going to find out. So, the Ides of March were today, the 15th of March, which means that Julius Caesar died exactly 1,978 years ago. To understand this, we need to take a bit of a deeper dive into the quite complicated Roman calendar. The Ides were a specific day in each month, around the middle of each month in the Roman calendar, right? The Ides were primarily a religious event. They were sacred to Jupiter, who is the supreme god of the Roman pantheon, and a priest called the Flamen Dialis, who was the high priest of Jupiter, would lead a sacred sheep called an Ovis Idulis through the city in a procession to the temple of Jupiter to be sacrificed on the Ides of every month, right? But the Ides also had a function in calculating the days of the Roman calendar. The reason for this is the Roman calendar wasn't numbered like ours is. It didn't have a 13th of July and a 21st of November and a whatever, right? What they did was they had several fixed points throughout the month that were determined according to the rules that I'm about to tell you, and then they would count backwards from that point to whatever day they were doing, right? So they would say it was 4 days before the Ides of February, right? And that's how they counted in their calendar system, right? I know this sounds confusing. Bear with me. I'm about to explain it to you. And then you can throw out your useful Western calendar and start using the Roman system instead. So you can text your friends and say, "Hey guys, let's meet at 7 p.m. 11 days before the Ides of January." And let them figure that out. Cool. So the first day of every month was called the Calends. Kalends, Calends. Yes, this is the ancestor of the modern word calendar. This was the first landmark of the month that we're going to use for counting. So the first day of March was called the Calends of March. Every single year, 1st of March, Calends of March. 1st of August, the Calends of August. Every single year. 1st of January was the Calends of January. That was sacred to the god Janus. Go and watch my video on Janus. I'll chuck a little thingo up here for you. Cool, so that's the straightforward part. Then the Ides, so if the Calends are the first day of the month, the Ides fall roughly in the middle. But the thing is that the Ides aren't always on the same day of every month, right? So the Ides are the third landmark. There's a second one in the middle we're going to talk about in a second. So the Ides are roughly in the middle, but it varies depending on how long the month is in that particular month, right? So just like our calendar, which is ultimately based on the Roman calendar, the months weren't all the same length. They varied, right? So the Ides usually fell on the 13th day of the month, but in March, May, July, and October, they fell on the 15th of the month instead, right? Because I think those ones were a bit longer and they had 31 days instead of 30 or something. Anyway. They were longer. The Ides were on the 15th, not on the 13th, right? So that includes March. Note that, because if it wasn't March or May or July or October, then the Ides would have been on the 13th. And if Julius Caesar was killed on the 15th, then it wouldn't have been on the Ides of whatever month that was. But in March, the Ides fall on the 15th because it's one of those 4 months, right? In between the Calends and the Ides was the Nones. That's the... So Ides is spelled I-D-E-S, and Nones is spelled N-O-N-E-S, Nones. And these were 9 days before the Ides every month, right? So these were either the 5th or the 7th of the month, depending on when the Ides were, whether they were on the 13th or the 15th of the month. So in March, May, July, and October, where the Ides is on the 15th, the Nones would have been on the 7th. Every other month of the year, they would have been on the 5th, right? Now, this is where the counting comes in. The days in between all of these landmarks were counted back from the next landmark, right? So if you wanted to say the third day of the month in a day, in a month where the nones were on the 5th day, let's say February, you would say that such and such is happening 3 days before the nones of February. If you wanted to say the 14th day of the month in July, where the Ides are on the 15th of the month, not the 13th, you would say 1 day before the Ides of July, right? If you wanted to say the 28th day of the month in October, which is a 31-day month where the Ides were on the 15th, 30 days, whatever, but a longer month where the Ides are on the 15th, you wanted to say the 28th, you wouldn't say 13 days after the Ides of October. You would say 2 or 3 days, or however many it was, before the calends of November. So you would go forward to the landmark of the next month and then count backwards from that one. You never count forward, you only count backwards from the next landmark that's happening in the future, right? So the 4th of July was 3 days before the nones of July, because July is one of the longer months where the Ides falls on the 15th. You count back 9 days from the Ides, that gives you the nones, and then you count back 3 days from the nones, and that gives you the 4th of July, which is 3 days before the nones of July. Right. That is a very complicated way of living, right? I'm kind of glad that we do have our modern calendars where we can just put numbers on every single day, because it must have gotten really complicated. And when you're reading ancient texts like, Livy and such, they will say that such and such happened 3 days before the nones of July. And then us poor modern researchers have to sit down there and go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, to figure out when stuff happened, right? And the Romans, because of the full length of the Roman year, it actually wasn't long enough, because not all of the months had enough days in them. So that there was a very slight difference between the solar year, where the Earth orbits the sun, and the reality of the Roman calendar, right? And so over time, the Roman calendar actually got out of sync with what was happening, until by the time of Julius Caesar, the Roman calendar was like 6 months out from where it should have been, and they were celebrating these summer festivals in like the middle of winter, and then celebrating their winter stuff in the middle of summer, and it was just completely cooked. And that's actually why the Roman calendar system got reinvented, in order to fix this problem. And I think it was either the big JC himself or Augustus, who was the first real Roman emperor, and they actually reordered the calendar, and that's where August comes from, Augustus. It used to be called something else before that. And they rearranged the number of days in each month in order to get the Roman calendar back on track. Because otherwise they would have had to wait another 500 years until it was back in sync again. But anyway, that's fun facts about it. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Thanks for watching this episode of ADBC History. My name is Dan, and I'll catch you in the next one.